All right, everybody, how you doing? It's Friday. It's the, I don't know, we're in the middle of August. It's the, I don't know, but there's a lot going on. We're back at Brigadoon Radio, where we like to talk about topics and thought leaders and independent thinkers that are shaping commerce and culture. And we're back with our good friend, Gerald Ashley. Gerald, how you doing?
Very well, Mark. I think this is episode 3 where I claim it's unbelievably hot and can't continue. We've met a big bureaucratic milestone today in the UK where some government officials have declared a drought. Quite what that means, it really is in their own language. I mean, in practical terms, the vast part of the southern England has not had any rain for 40 days. Yeah. And by English standards, that is staggering. And so everything, is dying and people are kind of crawling around on all fours. And what normally happens is when it becomes the big story, it rains next week. So I don't know, maybe by the next episode we'll have loads of rain, but it seems to be one of these stories that builds and builds and builds. And when it peaks, suddenly it breaks and we go back to normal.
Well, the weather is very interesting around Europe. There's a glacier melting in Switzerland, rivers in Germany and Italy are drying up. There's the wine fields, the vineyards of France. I don't know, is it actually, I don't know, have we actually warmed the planet? Is it actually happening?
Well, whatever's happening, you're dead right about having an effect. And I'm sure we'll talk about the important impact of lack of water in the European economy. And as you say, there are serious fires and things, particularly in Spain and France. And I saw a little news clip yesterday saying that British vineyards or Southern English vineyards are suddenly in fashion because with a really hot summer, we're going to produce sparkling wine that's up there with champagne. Now, of course, the French will dispute that immediately, though they may be voting with their feet because this last few years, some of the big French champagne houses have started buying small vineyards in England. So there we go.
Well, as we know, you can't use the word champagne. So how will you describe English sparkling wine? Do they have a fancy name for it yet?
Sparkling wine, and I always remember in California, it's Californian champagne. They don't seem to mind upsetting the French so much. And there is a Soviet champagne apparently.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should try and give them some coverage and they'll send us a crate and we'll see if we like it or not.
Can we locate it? That would be, I don't know. We have to go to the vault, talk to our friend Joe Praterini. Maybe he can get us smuggle a bottle for us.
I'm sure these things are available if you know the right people.
Well, speaking of knowing the right people, let's talk about Turkey. We're not talking about, I don't know if you know this, Gerald. Benjamin Franklin proposed that the turkey, the bird, be the national symbol of the United States of America. Did you know that?
No, I thought you guys just went straight for the bald eagle or whatever it was.
Let's talk about Turkey, the country of Turkey, not the wonderful bird of the United States. Gerald, what do we know about Turkey? What's happening in Ankara as we speak?
Well, I think it's one of these countries where people find it difficult to read what's really going on, and that's very much the case at the moment. I mean, let's wind back a little bit through history. Obviously, there's a lot of history with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the Balkans and everything after the First World War.
Right.
Modern Turkey arrived. Lots of disputes that still run on to this day with Greece. And that said, Turkey became a member of NATO. Historians may recall that the deal with Khrushchev and Kennedy was that Khrushchev would get rid of the missiles in Cuba on their way to Cuba in return for the Americans not putting IBCMs in Turkey. So Turkey's kind of, and it's a cliche, but it's kind of a crossroads of East and West and all the rest of it. Now the current government seems to be playing a game of both sides, both ends against the middle, but they're doing it in public, which is kind of interesting. You can almost see the conjuring trick. So what's going on where Turkey are making quite reasonable noises towards Putin? Some of the Turkish banks are going to join this ruble payment system. Turkey have managed to broker some deal between Russia and Ukraine over some grain shipments. But equally at the same time, they remain in NATO. And of course, they've been big suppliers of drones to the Ukraine.
Yeah.
So I think the general feeling is they're treading a fine line here. Maybe the reason is their interest is not actually to do with Russia in the north, but it's the south of the country, and Kurdistan, and all these sort of issues they've got with that, and their borders, where the Russians are essentially their allies. So they're kind of got a foot in both camps. Maybe they'll just kind of continue to play that, though. From what I read, I think the West is a bit more concerned that they're not quite so strongly in the West orbit as they used to be.
Yeah, I don't really have a good sense of Turkey myself. I mean, they have a huge presence here in DC. They're one of the most beautiful embassies, very prolific. You know, there's a huge Turkish-American diaspora collection here in the U.S. So it's certainly seen as a very important ally, even though it's certainly not the United Kingdom or France. But it does seem that Turkey itself is in a very interesting neighborhood, as you allude to, the long history and, you know, its placement on the map and what it has to deal with Syria. So I don't know, maybe they need to play this game where they got to be on all sides. And I don't know, as we've talked about before, maybe they're the back channel to the back channel. Maybe Turkey is playing a bigger role in diplomacy and kind of keeping the world settled. And these public situations where they're on both sides, maybe that's all choreographed.
I'm inclined to agree with that. They have been a little bit more fractious publicly in recent months. Like they wanted to put the brakes on Finland and Sweden joining NATO. And then suddenly, it went through all okay. And again, I don't know if you and I are probably two of the most cynical podcasters on the planet, but we kind of do wonder if we're seeing the theatre of politics rather than the real politics, or the realpolitik, if you like, that's going on in the background. I think you're right. Turkey is one of these countries that's all things to all men, but I guess they have to tread quite carefully. But they seem to be successful at it at the moment.
Well, it's interesting too, and I just recalled this. In 2016, there was that famous coup attempt that was suppressed, and that was quite... I mean, I remember that was like broadcast live on television, and that's not that long ago. The whole backstory there, that'd be interesting to kind of dig on. And I mean, I would suspect Turkey over the years has had a...
I think you've also got to dig back into history, that they became a deeply secular state with Ataturk coming in, I'm going to get the year wrong, but it's somewhere towards the middle of the First World War, maybe just before the start of the First World War. And it was a big crackdown on Muslim religion and sort of putting religious leaders firmly outside the political system. And over the last 20 or 30 years, that's been slowly dismantled. And in fact, Turkey is now much more got much more sort of religious political element to it than it ever had. And Erdogan, who is president, has played to that constituency. So it's a much more Muslim type country, if you like, than a secular one compared with 30 or 40 years ago. So that's another element.
Religion, too, is also an interesting aspect, because Constantinople, which is today Istanbul, tied into Kyiv, tied into Moscow, and kind of that breakaway Christianity. My understanding, like the Orthodox Church is tied into, there's connections to Turkey as well. So you wonder if the Russian-Turkey connection is even in the background religious as well.
I think that's right, and I think we can stretch our historic knowledge a little further and mislead viewers and listeners ever more by pointing out that a lot of this is to do with the split of the Roman Empire, the East and West, and those sort of fault lines that sort of formed in the 300s and 400s AD are pretty much still there. And you're quite right, a lot of them have become institutionalized in terms of religion, even things like different dates of the religious calendar and different religious rites and all the rest of it. So you would say, for example, the Russian Orthodox Church is much closer to Turkey and Greece than it certainly is to the Roman Catholic Church in Rome.
Even the art and architecture as well, the Byzantine nature of some of the churches and temples in that part of the world, in Russia and Ukraine, have a very heavy kind of Byzantine Turkish influence.
Yeah, we're back to one of our favorite authors and commentators, Tim Marshall. We are all slightly prisoners of geography. And the geography, if you sit in Kiev, is different from if you sit in Geneva or Berlin or
Yeah.
Istanbul, and you can't get away from that. And there's sometimes people have this sort of wonderful idea that we can all pull together and it's one planet and one mankind. But you just need to look out the window and see the geography, not just the politics, is so important. And of course, geography is important at the moment because of the weather, which I'm sure we'll come on to.
What's your sense about Turkey going forward? I mean, do you see them as one of the most important players in kind of world politics right now? Are they one to watch? Are they overrepresented, underrepresented in the news?
They're probably slightly underrepresented, but I think people like to classify countries in all sorts of different ways, don't they? But they're clearly a major regional power, put it like that.
Yeah.
You're not going to be doing anything much between the Balkans right the way down to Israel or right the way across to Iran without Turkey having some say or some influence or being against whatever may be going on. So they're clearly an influential power, and of course they, at the end of the day, they control the Black Sea, and so that's another element in all of this.
Which is not a small thing at all. And it's interesting you brought up the Cuban Missile Crisis, and this will be a good transition to our next topic, because here in the United States, we rarely, I mean, you have to be pretty well educated and kind of a deep scholar to know about the ICBMs in Turkey. The story, the mythology here in the U.S. is that, Kennedy stared down the bad guys and the boats went away. But once again, backroom politics, there was, what we saw was not the whole story, which is a good transition to the linear world, bombarded with simple explanations in a very complex world. What are your thoughts on the linear world? You brought this up.
Yeah, I thought this up, so I better it's not an original idea, but I raised it. And it's this idea of the risks of gamification of the world, that somehow we can look at decision making and risk in terms of a game. And people sometimes use chess or poker or some such similar game to act as an analogy for how the real world works. I actually think that's all nonsense squared. And the reason I think that is because take the game of chess, right? You've got 64 squares, I think it is, 32
right.
pieces. 32 pieces. You've got set rules on what you can do. And then I make a move, you make a move, and we go back in this sort of ping pong linear fashion. That is totally different from how business, commerce, and politics works. I may invent a new product, which is a competitor to you. You suddenly wake up and you've got the resources to make the next 6 moves in a row and crush me before I can do anything about it.
Right.
But there's something about the human mind that likes the idea that we can somehow create a network of or a grid of certainty if we can frame it into this sort of linear ideas. And we're uncomfortable with the fact that most things are much more complicated. And I think this is why in the modern age we struggle with models. I mean, everybody's got a model. Over in the UK, the Treasury's got a model, the Bank of England's got a model. There are endless models for when people are going to live and die and all the rest of it. And they're kind of okay. And they're okay until there's some new information. And when's the time you need a model to really work? When there's some new information. So at the end of the day, you're driving the car by looking through the rear view mirror rather than out through the front. Now, this appeals to the bureaucratic mind because it's nicely ordered. It appeals to politicians who want to say, well, I'm going to concentrate on transport, or I'm going to concentrate on, interest rate policy of the economy or whatever. It's just much more messy than that. And I think this is why we have problems nowadays that people are increasingly disenchanted with politics, business models, forecasts, experts, all the rest of it, predictions, because they're selling something they can't actually deliver. And we're slightly stupid to buy it. You shouldn't buy this because, it's not that simple.
Well, yeah, I think before we got on there, I was thinking, we were talking about this, like I've probably listened to 10,000 political speeches in various forms, from big to small policy speeches to, chats at a backroom barbecue. And it does seem, and I've been a victim of this too, just in writing this stuff or helping people. Basically, you want to find a way to explain to your audience what you're saying. So you want to look for simple stories and simple explanations.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if this drive to simplify the world and combined with media communications has put us in a situation where we're overemphasizing simple numbers, right? We're not really having complex, serious discussions, or I can't remember the last time I heard anybody say, I don't know. It could be a football coach, it could be a CEO, it could be a politician. They literally just say, I don't know. Like, everybody seems to want to have an answer, and my simple solutions.
It's because the audience wants an answer, and we'd rather have a wrong answer than no answer at all. And so, as you say, if somebody stands up and says, well, actually, we're not at all certain how things are going to pan out in Ukraine, immediately the media and commentators start screaming, oh, the government's clueless, a minister doesn't know what he's doing, and all the rest of it. But right. when you think about it, how ludicrous is the situation, and I'll draw on the UK, where we've had quite a large number of ministers change because of the defenestration of Boris a few weeks ago. And we've got, we had a health secretary who was in post, the previous one was in post for about 6-7 months. Now, this is an organization with 1.5 million people. It's one of the largest employers in Europe. How you can't even, you get your head around the organization chart in 6 months quite well. And yet these guys feel compelled to then get up on a stump or in a TV studio and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and we're seeing it with the Tory party election campaign at the moment, where candidates are saying things like, on day one, I'm going to be doing so-and-so. Well, how about do nothing and actually start to understand the depth and complexity of the problem before doing something? But of course, they get crucified if they take that approach.
Yeah, it is, the day one stuff I absolutely love, because you're like, you don't even know where the coffee room is, but on day one, you're going to save the economy. There's a great book. It's a bit old now. It's from 2014. I just remember it's called The Leading Indicators. It's a short history of numbers that rule the world. And, like, just take GDP. There's numbers that we listen to all the time that is referenced, like they're like the Holy Grail. Yeah. They give you all the answers. They are the Rosetta Stone. And they just become baked into the system, when in reality, they might not be the right numbers at all. And they're historic. Like, I always think about the way we measure trade is post World War II. It's like stuff we put into a box that's shipped on a boat, right? It doesn't take anything about financial services, hospitality, banking. We measure stuff that we can, right? And putting stuff in a box and measuring it is much easier than trying to figure out the value of free Google Maps.
Yeah, I'd leave listeners and viewers with this thought. There was this mantra that if you can measure it, you can manage it. Right. And I would rather say, if you can measure it, you can misinterpret it, you can mismanage it, or you can badly model it. It doesn't follow that if you've got the data, you'll get the answer. In fact, what normally happens is people start with an answer, and then they torture the data to death to support their particular view. So I think this whole narrow vertical way of thinking is not brilliant. If you can put it in the show notes, it's a rather a long link, but there is a fascinating blog by Dominic Cummings, of all people, who I know is a nice. Eminence grise for some people, on his experience in the Department of Education around 2010 to 2012. He wrote this blog in 2014, and it's terrifying. I mean, the idea that the bureaucracy in Whitehall are going to do anything other than save their own pensions. I just find it just extraordinary. And I can't imagine it's got any better over the last few years since he wrote it.
I think, too, what is interesting is a return maybe to probabilities. I think the intelligence services, or say the CIA, MI6, they don't talk in certainty. They talk in probability. And I don't know, maybe we need a bigger return to that. But we do, at the same time, as a society, we kind of worship the gambler, the big bet, the bold prediction. I don't know. Yeah, maybe we as humans are to blame, right?
Yeah. No. It's if you want to hang on a nice bit of jargon, it's called the ludic fallacy. And the ludic fallacy is the idea that you can reduce everything to a form of game, and you can work everything out. Some things are just messy. And it's why it's easier to predict credit card fraud than it is terrorist attacks, because there's far less data. But people want an answer. People say, the big boss says, give me the solution, give me the answer. And as you say, they don't want to hear, well, actually, to be honest, we don't know. It's not the way. It's not the way to advance your career. To say, I don't know.
I was at a cocktail party a few years ago, and somebody was asking me about the Chinese Communist Party and who was going to govern and what was going to happen. And I said, I don't know. But I go, somebody's going to govern China. Who it is, I don't know. But it was like it was a wholly unsatisfactory answer. And like to predict like what's going to happen in 10, 30, 40 years time, like I truly don't know. I know somebody's going to govern it. But is it communist? Sure, it's possible, but do I know for sure? No.
But it's a fool's errand, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, people can't predict the football results next weekend. And the idea that you're going to predict those sort of things on a long horizon, you can't. The one area that I think does play to prediction, or at least to general trends, is what we were talking about earlier. There are these big geopolitical blocks and geopolitical trends that never quite go away. They may ebb and flow, they may go very quiet, they may flare up. But there's always going to be trouble between Germany and Russia. There has been for the last 500 years. And it ebbs and flows, and poor old Poland's stuck in the middle. And that will always be the case. So those big strategic pictures may well be there, and they should help us, inform us of the more micro things. But the rest of it is just a game show. If you say, "Oh, I know who's going to be the next president of China,"
Well, let's keep this game show going and make some more predictions that are full of fallacies. Home technology. I don't know if you saw this, Gerald, but Amazon has bought Roomba. Roomba is the robotic disc-like vacuum that goes around your room, and it works behind the scenes. But there are, of course, people freaking out that Jeff Bezos and Team Amazon will now have all kinds of access to your home. They're going to know what kind of crumbs you're leaving on the floor, and they're going to map out your space. It's the Internet of Things coming into the room. I don't know. Nobody seemed to have a problem with Roomba, but now that it's being acquired by Amazon, it's scary.
I think it's a human reaction to this. It's a little bit like CCTV. When you first realize that CCTV, you're quite annoyed. Oh, bloody hell, why am I being filmed? And then you forget it's on, and you forget it's there. So a lot of people sign up to things like Siri and Alexa and all this kind of stuff, and they're a little nervous of it for a while. And then suddenly it's incredibly important. They need to ask Alexa to turn the radio on because they're too tired to reach over and do it. And I'm somewhere in the middle of all of this. I think some of these things are great, but I do worry about not so much whether Mr. Bezos knows what's in my fridge, but whether or not he can stop me from ordering stuff to put in my fridge. And I'm not obviously thinking of him. You can imagine the sort of people I am thinking about. But it does seem that increasingly our lives are on very thin sort of pieces of string. We order everything online. It all gets delivered. I must admit, I do nearly all my banking via my mobile phone. And then about 3 weeks ago, I couldn't find my mobile phone for about half a day. Mass panic. And then I suddenly realized half of my life is on this damn phone. And so is that sensible? Probably not. But human nature, I think, goes for the path of least resistance. And so the Internet of Things is here to stay, but I think it comes with loads of problems.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm all in on it. We have like the Google Home in our house, and I find, we use it to, ask the weather, play songs, do random stuff like that, make funny jokes. But it's interesting when I'm not in the space, when I'm used to it, I go into like a hotel room and I literally will say, hey, what's the weather? And there's no device there. I look like a total lunatic. So being used to it, it's interesting. There was a story in the New York Times in 2017 talking about how Roomba could start sucking up all this data. Yeah. And then it's only when Amazon got involved, in the last week, if you do a search, so many reporters are saying, oh, this is alarming. But this has always been in the background. It's interesting how stories become super important when elements come together, or there's a bias to like, oh, this is new information to me, even though this kind of topic has been out there.
And it's got a vividness, I can write the headline for you. Is your vacuum spying on you?
Right, exactly.
So it's kind of there straight away. This stuff isn't going away, but I think one of the problems is we're building a world which lacks resilience, and we're building a world where everything involves electricity, and that may be a problem quite soon. But certainly in Europe, electricity is going to be kind of an interesting topic.
Well, that and getting back to our earlier discussion around linear trends, like there's just so much more data that we're absorbing. Like, I don't know, do we need to know more data? I don't know. I mean, is it good? Is it bad? And right, and we're consuming all this stuff. Somebody's got to power it, and we're running into hydro power challenges all across the world, and minerals that are needed, lithium batteries, etc. It's quite interesting. We're running. We're in these two, as you talk about. We're in a two-speed world,
Yeah, I think listening to us both, you sound more optimistic than me, baby. I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist about these things, but I just do wonder if things are on quite a thin piece of string, and if that string snaps, what do you do? I mean, if there's some vague talk of maybe power cuts in the winter in the UK, I personally think that won't happen, but power outages, if you like. If they do, my life comes to a halt. I can't boil a kettle. I don't have an open fire. I don't know what I'm going to starve, I suppose. So I think, there's these so-called, there are lots of vital services that we just don't even think about, and that we've got to be careful, I think.
In some ways, too, modern electricity at this scale is it's relatively new. I mean, we're only talking like 70 years post World War II. I mean, this isn't like we've been living like this for thousands of years. I mean, you're right. Absorbing all this electricity, even having this conversation, transatlantic, all the different computers involved, the minerals and et cetera involved. It's pretty wild.
I mean, obviously, one of the huge advantages of all this technology is this podcast. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do this 30, 40 years ago. But no, you're right. And this is creating an engine of data. I mean, it's also the same business model from day one with the internet, which is I'll give you something for free in return for your data, and you don't even really bother or know that I've given you the data. And then I aggregate enough of that to be able to sell it as an advertising or marketing medium. And, the whole premise of cookies and everything all flows from that, really.
Well, it is sad, like that idea that ultimately you're just going to sell, more commercials or more marketing. There is the promise that, oh, listen, if we collect all this data, we can have a smarter world, we can be more efficient, we can be more modern. But to deliver me a burrito faster because they, know that I eat tacos in my house because of my Roomba vacuum. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a lot of progress.
No, but I think you may say that future progress is measured in tacos rather than in human happiness, which is surprising in America, where you're supposed to be pursuing happiness every moment of the day.
Well, we're always pursuing. No, we have the right to pursue happiness.
Oh, you may not.
We have the right. That doesn't mean we have happiness. We just have the right.
You don't have to be happy then. Okay.
Yeah, you just have the right to pursue it. Come on, man. All right. It's interesting too. As somebody who lived in California for a few years, getting back to tacos, I have not had a good taco since I've crossed the Mississippi River. When you come east in the U.S., tough to find a good taco.
This is another one of these vital dividing lines in the United States. Rather than the Mason-Dixon line, we're talking about the Mississippi taco area.
Oh yeah, the Mighty Miss is the line of demarcation for tacos.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. What are we reading and watching? I'm going to go first.
I've been in the habit the last few weeks of only being able to answer one of these questions satisfactorily, and I think I might do that again today. I got a birthday gift from some relatives, in fact, my brother-in-law and sister last week, and I think they may vaguely watch this show, and so they bought me another one of these sort of history books that will tell us all we need to know about the past, and this one is called The Opium War. And the Opium War, and kids in Britain would cover it in 2 sentences in a 1-year history class. It's essentially how the British imported opium from India to China, and when the Chinese government didn't like what was happening to drug addiction and all the rest of it, we kind of generated a couple of wars because we felt the Chinese government was pretty dissolute and
Kind of.
yeah, it was kind of, you were kicking in a sort of rotten door. That kind of worked, but of course it's had, and this is a very fascinating book. It's by maybe 10 years old now, a lady called Julia Lovell, who's a sort of Chinese expert on history of China. Well, she's English, but expert on Chinese history. And of course, like all these things, the echoes are still there. So that the feeling in China now of humiliation and being looked down to by the British in particular, and maybe the Western world in a broader sense, still burns very greatly, I think, in the Chinese psyche. So I'm going to plow through it again. Why do people keep getting me these really large books? This one's 300 pages. It's not just one opium war, there are two. So there you go. But I think it will, having known Hong Kong a little bit in my past, I think I can see where this is all going. And it's why it's kind of still an open wound, I think, with China.
No, 100%. That sounds like a great book. Definitely a worthy read. I mean, the history of that is front and center of today's Chinese Communist Party. And it wasn't that long ago in the span of, 5,000 years of Chinese history. And it's important to know whenever China's kind of fallen, it's been invaded by outside foreign devils, foreign forces.
Yeah.
And the Opium Wars was at the end of one of the dynasties, which you're right, was weak and crickety, and the Brits took advantage of it.
Yeah, right. That absolutely agreed. And in terms of watching, I'm going to kind of pass the baton back to you slightly, because I don't think there's anything dramatically interesting I've been watching the last couple of weeks. That there is a film coming out called The Menu, which seems to be I don't know if it's out in the States yet. It seems to be like a very upmarket murder mystery about sort of maniac chefs.
Yeah,
so I don't know where
I've seen the trailer. It looks fantastic.
Is this Agatha Christie sort of meets Gordon Ramsay? I don't know, but anyhow, that may be one to look out for. But otherwise, the topic I was going to raise with you, that in the UK, we just finished the Commonwealth Games last week, and now there are moves to talk about having electronic gaming as part of the Commonwealth Games. It won't surprise you to know that I'm sort of harumphing and declaring that this is the beginning and the end of Western civilization. But it does amaze me that kids on keyboards could end up winning gold medals because they're playing some video game.
Well, it's called esports. It's not called electronic video games. It's esports.
That's just a marketing term.
And no, you're right. It was in the Commonwealth Games. It's going to be in the Asian Games 2022. And there's huge speculation that 2024 Paris will have esports in the Olympics. So esports is happening. It's more being connected to data, burning up electricity, playing sports. Pretty wild.
So
it's happening.
The future is not building stadiums or stadia, but everybody's going to be hunched around their PC at home watching all of this stuff.
Well, as we're broadcasting this, there's millions of kids watching somebody play some video game on Twitch, and a lot of pro sports teams now are on the side building, esports teams and arenas, and the audience is just absolutely. The numbers are kind of breathtaking. I mean, they're bigger than Premier League soccer.
Slightly get my facts wrong here, but there was either a football final or a World Cup final of some sort, soccer, in esports, where everybody picks their own squad, and both sides had Ronaldo playing for them, which I thought was kind of interesting.
That's smart.
And this, maybe just to finish this point then, I've been very dismissive of the metaverse. Is this where the metaverse starts to turn into kind of real dollars and stuff, do you think?
Sports can be a gateway because, you can talk about digital natives and people being used to it. But I think where metaverse is going to go, which is interesting, the last few weeks, 2 of the top executives at Meta/Facebook have actually moved to London. So I think what they're going to try to do is go the B2B route, enterprise solutions.
Yeah.
Instead of doing this podcast like this,
we'll
do it in the metaverse, which will be, I don't know, more exciting, I guess. But I think it's almost like a two-pronged attack. You have the youth that are used to all this stuff, but it's going to be how do you get older people with the money and the budgets to say, yeah, we're going to do everything in the metaverse.
Yeah, well, my view on all of this, but I think it's just interesting as an element of, the whole business of this business is trying to monetize this and turn all this stuff into dollars, and maybe these sort of things are the sort of things people will pay to participate in and watch.
I'll send you a deck, Hunter. I'm going to put it together a deck. It'll be all linear trends, which will answer all these very complex questions. Here's a book I'm reading. It's called Protocol. It's by Capricia Penvic Marshall. I butchered her name, but she was the chief of protocol in the Obama administration. It's a great book, The Power of Diplomacy, How to Make It Work for You. It's a great, interesting book. It's tidbits about her experience working at high level, State Department, White House protocol events, traveling around the world, but also how to act appropriately in the world of business and your own individual life.
Yeah, no, I vaguely saw a book review for it last week, and it does have a very good book. It's one of those sort of insider insights that actually is of use rather than just general gossip.
Yeah, I know there's a lot she's got several chapters in here about how-tos and things to look out for. And, some of it is common sense, but, dealing with diplomats and keeping everybody happy and different customs and traditions. It's a good book. Yeah. So, and Protocol seems to be solely dedicated to the real world, to the real verse. We haven't done metaverse Protocol yet, so.
No, well, we're screwing enough things up in the real verse, so before we move on, I would have thought.
I think a show I've been watching is on HBO here in the States, Industry. It's about these young bankers in London that are, out to save the world. How you make a lot of money, but great soundtrack, fantastic. Everybody's beautiful, sexy, smart, the way I imagine banking in London. So,
no, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's, of course, it's there've been loads of these shows over the years, and there've been loads of films, things like The Wolf of Wall Street and The Big Short and all these things, and they sort of get it right, but they also kind of get it royally wrong. But then that's probably true of every TV program on medicine or cop shows or all the rest of it. They get some of it right. I mean, what they never get right is the sort of sheer tedium of box ticking and form filling, and, regulation and all this stuff in banking. And I'm sure if it's cop shows, you never have a whole episode of a cop show where they're moaning about they've got all these forms to fill out because of the arrests.
Yeah, that would be pretty dreadful television. Speaking of television, to our friends in Rome, hey, what's up? We're ready.
They're on holiday.
It's true.
They're on holiday.
Okay.
I'm going to fire a warning shot at them now. If they don't, back up their ideas, we may get offers from elsewhere. We may not. But we are available. Is I think what we're saying.
Well, as we chat about this week, Apple is getting heavy into the podcasting game. They're going to build studios and build more content. So I don't know. Maybe we go to the Apple empire.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to be associated with that name, we'd have to, we'd consider them, I guess.
We'd take a meeting at least.
Yeah, we'd take the call. We'd take the call, definitely.
All right, Gerald, thank you very much. Happy birthday, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Great. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Ciao.